As I continue to move back after my in-cab inspection, I'm going to look at my diesel exhaust fluid to make sure that that isn't leaking either. While I was in there, I made sure all my levels were proper. And then I'm also going to be looking at the frame of the tractor itself, just making sure all the bolts are secured. I don't see anything missing, cracked, bent, any unsafe welds. I'm also going to be looking at the catwalk to make sure that it is properly secured. I also make sure like all the doors and hinges are in good shape. There aren't any issues there. I'm going to look at the drive shaft on the tractor as well, just making sure that it isn't bent and that there isn't any issues with the connection or anything like that. Make sure it's not twisted. On the drive tires, I'm going to make sure that these are at a minimum of 230 seconds. I forgot to mention on the front, I'm going to make sure that these are at a minimum of 430 seconds. We'll examine the rest of the exhaust system when we get to the passenger side of the vehicle. On these tires, on these brakes, I'm going to be looking at the slack adjusters and push rod to make sure that they don't have more than 1 inch of play. I'll look at if I can get in there, look at the brake drums. I'll make sure that those are free of any kind of debris or oil. Again, just like on the front, I'm going to look at the rims, checking for rust on the dripping from the lug nuts, checking the proper tire as well. One thing that I'm going to do differently on this tire than on the front ones is I'm going to look in here and make sure that there isn't a gap and that it's free of any debris or anything like that. Checking as I'm walking around, I'm looking at the suspension for the air, both for the air suspension and for the air supply for the braking system. As I'm walking around the vehicle, I'm just double checking to make sure that I don't hear any leaks. On the springs, I'm going to be looking at these leaf springs as well, making sure that they aren't broken or shifted or any of them are missing. And then also in the middle here, there's going to be some U-bolts on this as well. Just looking to see that there aren't any issues with the U-bolts where they're bent or missing or anything like that. And then there's my little brake chamber that I'm going to inspect. The hose is on, just making sure that there aren't any leaks or anything like that. After I've inspected the frame of the vehicle, the tractor itself, and the brakes, the wheels and stuff, I'm going to go to the coupling area. I'm going to make sure that my air lines and my electrical lines are properly secured. Making sure that they aren't dragging or anything, that they're held up properly. And on the air lines itself, I'm just going to kind of give it a quick once over, up and down, just making sure I don't see any abrasions, spots where it might have gotten torn or could possibly be leaking. And same thing in the electrical line, just looking at the line up and down just to kind of make sure it's in good shape. Check the connections there and up here just to make sure that they're properly connected. I don't hear any air leaks or anything coming from that area. I'm also right here, I'm going to kind of get down and look up underneath there and making sure that on the apron and the skid plate I don't see any gap. Looking at the lever over there, just making sure it's in the locked position, and making sure that there's an adequate amount of grease for lubrication. I can also from here look down at those shock absorbers and just make sure that I don't see any leaks It can be a little difficult to see those ones back there, but I'll just kind of check to see if I see any leaks on that as well. Coming to the back of the connections, I'm going to get underneath here and just making sure the locking jaws are in place and the kingpin is in place. And then just kind of look around, making sure I don't see any, just looking at all those spots, I don't see any missing bolts. You know, there's 4 bolts over there, 4 bolts over there. Looking at the bolts that connect the skid plate to the frame, just making sure there's nothing missing there. Looking on the top, looking on the bottom, so I can see both the nuts and the bolts. And from this position is where I would get down and test those slack adjusters down there, just to make sure there isn't too much play. Now, on the trailer itself, I am going to double check to make sure that the mud flaps are properly attached and there aren't any tears or anything in those. I'm also going to look at the landing gear, make sure that they are in the fully raised position. And now this is kind of where I'm back to inspecting the trailer, so I'm going to go ahead and pause and restart it.